Are you a small business owner that is confused over your accounting records? Accounting by Art can help you eliminate this confusion with a free initial one-to-one consultation. Art offers QuickBooks training seminars covering both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, as well as addressing your specific needs and questions. Visit accountingbyart.com and set up your free consultation today. Get instant relief from daily stress with Instant CalMag C, the perfect blend of calcium, magnesium, and vitamin C as a natural remedy for anxiety and stress. Visit calmag-c.com or call 727-642-8087. Use or mention the code HAPPINESS and get 10% off your order of CalMag C today. Ep7 of Real Live Marketing. Hi, welcome to the show. Hey, so today's show, we've got Robert Vogel. Robert's going to talk to us about relationship building. So relationship building is something that, is a skill. I've actually gone out in the street and met strangers. I spent hours and hours and hours meeting strangers, talking to them, finding things that are interesting to them and interesting to me for us to talk about and discuss, and developing those relationships, although maybe short-lived, developing those short little relationships as part of my developing overall relationship skills. I have to say there's a lot to be learned about developing relationships. It certainly is a big deal in marketing. It'll take you a long ways to make friends. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I occasionally run into in business is false information. Something I had somebody tell me not that long ago in response to something they felt some action that they had to take is, Barry, it's not personal. It's just business. And, I don't know about you, but that I may have even said it in the past, but I have to say that saying rubs me the wrong way. And I wondered why. It's not personal, it's just business. Well, I think that everything that I do in my personal life, I would also want to exemplify in my business. So how I am as a person translates out over into how I am as a business person. The way I would treat people personally is also going to be the way that I think I should treat people in my business. The same kindness that I would give to a customer, I would give to a waiter who's serving me, or to any relationship. I would treat people with an equal amount of respect. Well, I looked up this saying, it's not personal, it's just business. And I found out that the saying was originated by a guy named Otto, and he worked for the mafia in the 1930s. You can look it up yourself on Google. But there you go. I understand. He said, hey, buddy, it's not personal. It's just business, as he's popping a slug in your head. It felt awful personal. Ouch, or as he slapped on those concrete shoes, yikes, that's personal. So remember, next time somebody says it's not personal, it's just business, remember where that saying came from. Maybe educate them and show them a little bit better way to live. So I think you're going to enjoy this interview today. And then afterwards, I've got one major tip for you on how to build relationships and 10 ways to apply it. All right. So this is later on in the program. One major tip for you on how to build relationships and 10 ways to use it. So listen in and let's go enjoy some real live marketing. Feeling lost with accounting, bookkeeping, or payroll for your small business? Accounting by Art offers a free one-on-one consultation for the state of your business. Art Stump has years of experience helping small business owners with their accounting needs. He also offers QuickBooks training seminars covering both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, as well as addressing your specific needs and questions. Seminar participants also get a free 1-hour office visit after the class to be sure their QuickBook issues are solved to their satisfaction. Mention this ad at your consultation and get 10% off initial services when you sign up and pay for your first month. Visit accountingbyart.com today and get started. Our everyday lives are filled with sources of stress and anxiety. In a society where we are bombarded with the various drugs that quote-unquote fix our problems, it is a comfort to know that there is a natural remedy out there to combat stress in your life. Instant CalMag C is a blend of calcium, magnesium, and vitamin C, proven to reduce anxiety and stress at a higher efficiency rate than using the ingredients separately. Mixed with boiling water, Instant CalMag C powder transforms to a smooth glass of mineralized water that many people find is a natural remedy not only for anxiety and stress, but also for muscle and menstrual cramps and even hangovers. Visit calmag-c.com or call 727-642-8087 to order a bottle of Instant CalMag C today. Get 10% off your order with the code HAPPINESS. That's 727-642-8087 or on the web at calmag-c.com. Great. So I'd like to welcome Robert Vogel from the Good Faith Business Network. Thanks for joining us today, Robert.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. So I want to ask you a couple questions about yourself personally. I know I went over like a little bit of what you do, but are you a St. Louis native?
Born and raised in St. Louis. My parents are both from the Dogtown area, and I was born in Dogtown. And when I was 3 or 4 years old, then my parents moved to North County. In fact, I grew up in Hazelwood, and I've seen pictures, but of course I don't remember it. But we had a farm across the street from our house, which was the first house built in the subdivision. So I grew up in Hazelwood, went to St. Martin de Porres grade school, St. Thomas Aquinas High School, and then went to Florissant Valley Community College and commuted then after that over to Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville.
Great. Yeah. All right, good. So you're native.
I'm a native, yeah.
Really?
I love St. Louis and traveled a lot, but will always call St. Louis my home.
Fantastic. So good. And so if I've mentioned what your business is now, what kind of different jobs have you had that have led up to where you are now in life?
Well, I've had all kinds of different jobs over the years. Starting in high school, I used to clean swimming pools and used to work in selling swimming pools and pool tables and recreational products, which I really enjoyed. I did that through high school and college, and I think I enjoyed it most because I had interaction with people on a regular basis. And then as I went through school, I graduated with a degree in mass communications, first degree in television, radio production, and then mass communications. And I really thought that I was going to be, a director or a producer. I didn't really have any aspirations to be on air, but I wanted to be a director or a producer because I like to kind of be the quarterback of things. I like to be involved in things from start to finish, and I like to be in the thick of it. I like to be in the middle of it. So as I graduated from SIU Edwardsville, I had an internship scheduled with one of our local radio stations, and at the last minute it was postponed and then eventually canceled. So I wound up going to an advertising agency that did some pretty heavy broadcast, and I did so a little bit with some hesitancy because it wasn't exactly what I thought I was going to do. But as soon as I got there, I found out that being an account management in an ad agency was a lot like being a director or a producer for a TV station because you're right in the middle of it. You're in the thick of it all. So I really enjoyed it, and I got bitten by the agency bug, as they say. So I wound up doing an internship, and then I worked for a black-owned and operated newspaper here in St. Louis called the St. Louis American. Okay. And I also worked for a black-owned and operated PR firm. And then I got my first agency gig after a couple of years, and I went in as an account director and worked there for 5 years, then moved to another agency for 5 years. Then I worked at a PR firm, and then after a short period of time, I had a couple of clients who followed me through my career those first 10 years or so, 10 or 12 years. And I wound up going to work for one of my clients, which was a little bit different. So I had my first foray into what we call the client side, and I really never thought I'd go over there. And I found out pretty quickly that the grass isn't always greener, but I kind of knew that going in. But it was a great experience, and then I wound up on 2 different occasions getting recruited away to go start marketing communications departments for other organizations. And then most recently, I've worked at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul of St. Louis, which was my first foray into the not-for-profit world. And I served as the Director of Development and Partnership Programs, and I did that for 4 years, and I absolutely loved it. I found out that that was really my passion. And of course, I wasn't going to get rich working at a not-for-profit, but I found that's where my heart took me, and I enjoyed that job every single day. And I wound up leaving that organization, although I'm still intimately involved. I'm no longer on the payroll, and I did so after being the runner-up for the executive director's role there. And as I departed there, I had a couple of friends who approached me and said, you need to figure out a way to really leverage your network and your relationships. So out of that birthed the Good Faith Business Network. That's how it all started. So it was a crossroads between some friends approaching me and trying to help me figure out what I wanted to do next, and my departure from the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. So no matter what I've done throughout my career, regardless of the title that I've held, it's always been relationship development that's driven me.
Well, as a result of that, you really understand the workings of St. Louis, I imagine.
I think so. I know a lot of what's happening in St. Louis. From a geographic standpoint, I've been just about everywhere and done a lot of travel throughout the metropolitan area. And then I've seen St. Louis from a number of different perspectives, from the minority side to the corporate side, to the agency side, to the promotional side, the PR side, and then from the not-for-profit side. And they're all very interesting, and it's very nice to be able to have that perspective to bring to the table. And I think that's made me who I am today, because it gives me a certain insight into so many different challenges that I face on a regular basis.
That's great. It's a great city. So
It sure is.
It's a lot of fun working here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, great. We're going to talk about relationship development, which is we're talking about it as a marketing tool, because I mean that's what we do here at Real Life Marketing. We're focusing on a particular marketing tool every week that businesses and nonprofits can use to further what they're doing. So first off, it's good to start with the definition. What is your definition of relationship development?
Well, I'll start by answering and telling you what relationship development is not, in my opinion. Relationship development is not networking, and it's not making transactions or sales. Relationship development is really all about creating lifelong relationships with your customers, your vendor partners, your constituents, your influencers, your stakeholders. It's about having a common bond and creating a passion around something in particular. It might be a community effort, it might be a product, it might be a service, but relationship development is really all about creating value, a shared value for a particular effort or initiative. And I've done a lot of project work over the years, either while I worked for employers and organizations, or while I may have worked on my own. And my business at the time was called, and continues to be called, RCV Marketing. And people say all the time, RCV Marketing, that's a little vain, isn't it, Robert C. Vogel? Well, it is, but I wanted to put my name onto something. But years ago, I decided, RCV, while it stands for my name, it also stands for something else, and that is relationships create value. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. So relationship development is really about turning transactions into relations. I know the importance of being able to make transactions and take something to the bank every week, every month, every quarter, every year. Nobody can deny the importance of doing that. But you'll continually be in a transaction mode if you approach it that way, as opposed to going into any kind of an engagement thinking about building a relationship. So it's taking transactions and making them into relations. If you approach it that way, the transactions will always follow, because people will want to continue to work with you. And I've found over the years that people want to work with people that they know, like, and trust, and people who have confidence in them, people who have confidence in themselves, and again, have that shared passion for making something happen, whether it be a community project, promoting a product or a service, or anything along those lines.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, getting to know somebody, liking them, inevitably leads to trusting them and wanting to do business with them. And then,
Absolutely.
of course, from a business perspective, where you're providing service to to people who now you like and care
Hmm.
about, well, that naturally builds the
Right.
level of service too.
Right.
So that's great. That's great. How would you say that the whole subject of relationship development has kind of evolved for you over the years, compared to like where you started? I mean, you've been in PR, marketing, you've worked with nonprofits. I mean, your career has been about understanding people.
Hmm. Right.
So how would you say that that's developed from where you started to where you are now?
Well, I think it's always been about making connections, not necessarily making a connection where I hand you my business card, you hand me yours. It's about making a connection in your mind with one another and touching somebody's mind, touching somebody's heart about, again, something that's very shared or passionate to both parties. And I think about the people with whom I've had business engagements over the years, and 99% of the time, the people who have worked with me because of what I mentioned a minute ago. People want to work with people that they know, like, and trust. And a large majority of the time, 99% out of 100, it's due to relationship development and the understanding of somebody's product or somebody's service, and not just trying to push it because he or she is a client of yours and you're trying to make good for them. Obviously, that's what you need to do, but it's really more like looking at that big picture for how can I help these people, not only with the project or the assignment that they've given me, but how can I do more? How could I bring that added value? How can my relationship create more value? The RCV decree is what I call it. And the decree is really all about connect, cultivate, and collaborate. So from day one, coming out of school, even though I didn't think about it at the time, I realize now in hindsight that the connection side of it was how can I build a connection, start a relationship with somebody? How can I cultivate that along the way so that I build a friendship and a long-term relationship? And then how can I collaborate? And the collaboration aspect of it almost always starts with how can I help that person? What can I give to this person that's more than what they expected? And I found that in almost every instance, the more you give, the more you get something back. And you might call it karma, you might call it the way of the world, the way of business. And we all know people who are out looking to make a transaction and make something happen because they're looking for what's in it for me. How much can I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, but that's not the approach that I think people should take. It has to be, what more can I give you to make you a satisfied customer and to make you somebody who wants to work with me again in the future? How can we build that relationship again? Not a transaction, but a relation.
Right. Well, it makes sense. I mean, it's going to be easier for you to sell something to somebody if you're sold on it,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes being sold that the person actually needs it.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And one of the one of my favorite sales books, one of the rules in it is, if you want to never see somebody again, sell something they don't need.
Right. Yes.
So, I mean, that I understand, sometimes you're looking at goodness, they're about to write me a check. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be difficult to say, you know what, you don't really need that.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Absolutely.
that's the case, that they don't actually need it, that's
Right.
the right thing to do long term.
Yeah.
Because you won't see them again if you have them write that check.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You have to step up to the table sometimes and share your expertise and at least make a suggestion to people that I know you're interested in A, B, and C. I can understand why you want A, but B and C don't really fit. And let me make a suggestion while we should pass B and C and go to D and E or something along those lines, because you bring your level of expertise to the table. That's why people hire you in the first place. And then you have to figure out what's in the best interest of my client, my partner, my community, whomever it might be at the time. So I think that's an excellent point.
So good. So what are 5 different things that would go into building a good relationship with someone as a customer or as a client?
Well, I mentioned previously that I think it's critically important to pursue what I call the RCV decree, which is really relationships create value, and from that comes connect, cultivate, and collaborate. But I really utilize a 5-step process, and I do this regularly in my personal life, my professional life, and in my community life, That meaning my immediate community in which I live, as well as those not-for-profit organizations, community organizations for which I have a passion. And it really starts with identification from a business standpoint. First of all, identifying who are my clients, who are my best clients, who are my prospects, who are the people who can use my service or my client's service, which is what I do most often. How can I help my clients figure out who is my target audience? How do I identify who they are? How do I identify who the best clients are for them? And then after the identification process, there's education. I've found that over the years, people who are best educated are more willing to open up their pocketbook and write a check or make an investment of time in a product or a service if they understand what it is. A great example, the healthcare industry today is just, in my opinion, a total mess. So the more often people who are within healthcare can take the time to really simplify and educate people about a product or a service that they might need, the better off they're going to be, because then people begin to have that know, like, and trust aspect that comes into play.
There's a lot of tools that you can use to educate too these
Absolutely.
days. I mean,
Absolutely.
with video and...
Yeah, now more than ever with everything that's out there, social media, the internet, more people go to find research and information on just about any product and service online more than ever before, obviously. So there's the identification, the education, and then there's the cultivation aspect of it. And cultivation is really, how do we start to build our relationship? What are the kinds of things that I continually want to put in front of you, or that we want to put in front of your clients, so that they continue to have a vested interest in your product or your service? How do we get them to look forward to email newsletters that you send out, or phone calls that you make, or visits that you might have with their office? So then we go from identification to education to cultivation to inclination. How do we get your customers, your prospects, to be inclined to want to pick up the phone and call you? So we're no longer pushing your product or service at somebody, but now we're having it pulled through from the other end, because you've educated enough along the way that these people are now going to call you and say, would you tell me a little bit more about what we discussed last month? Because I've been thinking about that, and I think I want to buy this, and I think I want to buy that, or invest in this service, or learn a little bit more about what we discussed last. So it's kind of turning the tables and making them inclined now to want to know more about what it is that you have to offer. And then the fifth step, after identification, education, cultivation, inclination, then comes collaboration. How do you collaborate with your customers so that you're working for their best interest on a daily basis? They're bringing ideas to the table as often as you are, and it's no longer of what can you do for me relationships. It's what can we do together to move this thing forward. So now you're automatically a member of their team, and they feel like you're with them on everything that you do moving forward. And eventually what happens as a result of that is they become your advocates. You know what you need to do now? You need to talk to Robert, or you need to talk to Barry, because he helped me to do this, or he helped me to do that. And all of a sudden they become your advocates, or some people like to say that, my customers are my salespeople, because they're constantly referring me to people. So that's ultimately, I think, what you want to do. So those 5 steps are what I call the 5-step process to relationship development.
Great.
Yeah.
We started off in, my business started off in market research, where we would, we'd go out and we'd do a lot of surveys to track down like who the right people were to talk to about a particular product, what their reality was on the product, how to package the product, or what it should look like, what the product even should contain, right? And how to present it so that people would then pass it on and say what you wanted them to say to other people. So it's a lot of surveys. Was what we used to do, and we still do it today, but that's how we started, was in market research. It would seem like in building a relationship, you've got to ask a lot of questions.
Yes.
I found that like one of the best ways to get to know somebody is to ask a lot of questions. How does that process fit into what you do?
Well, I think that's kind of the base point, the ground point for building a relationship, as you said, because I tell people regularly on new engagements as well as incremental engagements, I tell people regularly that I don't always have the answers, but I almost always know the right questions to ask. And interestingly enough, so many times I meet with people, whether it be for coffee or lunch or in somebody's office, and he or she will say at the end of 90 minutes, wow, this was the best conversation I've had in weeks with somebody on this topic or that topic. And after I think about the conversation that we had, I find out and realize that it really wasn't a conversation. It was me asking one or two key questions and then really being a good listener. I think that's the key to the whole thing, because people don't want to be preached to, which is why I think relationship development is key, not relationship management, but relationship development. Most people really don't want to be managed, but they don't mind being developed. And development involves a lot of listening. It's really listening to what people have to say and then being able to play that back, and in many cases, verbally contract with somebody about, here's what I think I heard you say, Barry. Is that right? What if we did this? What if we did that? And we agreed that we're going to do this next, or we're going to do that next. People really appreciate the fact that you listen. So back to my point, I've had a lot of meetings where I walk away and people say, wow, this has been a great conversation. When it really wasn't a conversation, it was just a listening session. So when I start new engagements, I usually tell people I want to do a listening tour. I'd like to meet with your management team, and I'd like to meet with individuals throughout your organization and just ask some key questions and listen. And to your point about research, regularly I have people say, well, we really don't need to do that because we've done this so many times internally. We pretty much know what our target audience is or what our customer base wants, when in fact they really don't, because it's so easy to sit around the board table or sit around the lunch table and tell each other what you want to hear. We know many times that our customers want this product in red or this product in blue, when that's really not the case. Your customers might want it in green, but you've told yourself so many times that red and blue are the best colors because it's easier for you from a manufacturing standpoint, or it happens to be your wife's favorite color, or whatever the case might be. So that objective research is so critically important. And inevitably what I find out is that people will always share with you some little trinkets of information that you never knew existed out there before, by virtue of the fact that you're asking them questions instead of deciding for yourself what your customers want. There's always some interesting information that'll come out of that. And I always suggest to my customers, let a third party do that for you, because your customers, if you've built a relationship with them, many times they don't want to tell you something that you don't want to hear because they don't want to hurt your feelings. We're all human beings. But they'll tell a third party, either in person or sometimes on the phone, well, I wish they would do this differently, or I wish they'd do that differently. And they may tell you that anonymously. They may tell you, no, you can go ahead and share that I said that to you. And so often the investment that you make for research pays for itself many times over, because now you don't have to go back to the drawing board and start over 2 or 3 different times because you misfired on a particular project. You have the information that you need to really start your program moving forward. So research, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah, no, telling people what they want maybe has some workability, but it's much better to find out what people actually do want, and they're more willing to accept it. Absolutely. Otherwise, you're going to build up, telling people they might accept it, but there's going to be animosity probably associated with it.
Absolutely, that's right.
That makes sense. That's great. That's great advice, asking the right questions. So what would you say, how often do you I noticed that when we first met, actually, the first meeting that we had, you asked me a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. That's one thing I noticed is really, it's like, I didn't really actually find out much about you our first meeting at all. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say that I noted that, is that you plied me with a lot of questions. I found that to be very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a good tool for you, because now you have a basis from which to approach me in the future. Yep. And so that must be a big part of what you do, just in even gaining new clients yourself.
Yes, that is a big part of what I do moving forward with every engagement. And when I say engagement, I mean not just professional, but personal. People that I meet in the street, people who are in my neighborhood. I find that if you ask a lot of questions, most of the time people don't mind answering them, because people like to talk about themselves. And what you just mentioned too, I hear regularly people say, we've had 2 or 3 conversations, and I know I've told you a lot about what I do, but I don't think I ever asked you any questions, or I don't think you ever told me what you think about this, or what do you do when it comes to doing this or doing that. So I think that's interesting, and what that also does is lead to yet another meeting or another touch point or you can have a conversation, and over the course of 2 or 3 conversations, guess what happens? You start building a relationship with somebody. It may not be somebody who necessarily is going to become a customer, but it might be somebody who is an influencer or a stakeholder in a particular project, or somebody who can make a reference. I can't tell you how many times I've had people call me and say, I ran into so-and-so over the weekend at a barbecue, or I saw somebody in an event and I was talking to them about something and they said, you need to reach out and talk to Robert Vogel. That happens pretty regularly. So, I can't talk to people every day of every week and just have conversation. Obviously, from a business standpoint, you have to kind of run that through a filter. But I make it a point to not screen out people who call me or get referred to me, because you never know how you might be able to help somebody. Forget about whether or not you have a business relationship with them. If you can help them and somehow make or create a winning situation for somebody, ultimately you're going to win in that as well, because that person now is going to know, okay, he had my best interest at heart. And whenever they have the opportunity, whether they know it consciously, unconsciously, they're going to wind up trying to find ways to help you. And this isn't something that I calculate in my mind. It's just something that happens. And I have people say to me regularly, wow, you really do a good job at bringing out conversation and getting to topics that people don't necessarily want to discuss, or asking questions a different way than what somebody else asked it before. And that person never got an answer, but you did. Well, again, it goes back to know, like, and trust. People don't mind how much information you know about them. And there's an old adage that people don't care how much you know once they know how much you care. And through asking questions and building relationships, I think you get to that point pretty easily over time.
That's interesting. It seems like the old adage, it's better to give than receive, is paying off here, because what you're giving is interest. Yeah. You're interested in someone else, genuine interest, right. And you're giving that to that person, and then eventually they feel like they owe you. I mean, sort of. It's sort of like, wow, I need to give Robert some interest because he's given me so much interest. I have to pay him back. And what do you say? Then they're willing to pay you back that interest that you've unselfishly paid to them.
Yeah, that again happens pretty regularly. I get phone calls every week at least where people will call and say, I just had a conversation with somebody, or I met somebody at this networking event, and your name came up in conversation. Lots of times I don't know how it came up in conversation, or somebody can't remember who it was exactly who gave them my name, or they overheard somebody talk about it, and they'll call and say, do you have time to talk on the phone, or could we meet in person? And whenever possible, I try to meet people in person, because I think it's so helpful to look at somebody in the eye and have a conversation, and to be able to shake hands with somebody. Not that we can't use the technologies that we have today, but when it comes right down to it, most people don't purchase a home without having a relationship with a real estate agent and trusting that person. Most people don't buy a car these days without talking to a salesperson. Life insurance, choosing a school, so many of those kinds of things. People are now going back to school now, go to the school they go to because they took a tour at the school, the high school, the secondary school, the college, whatever it might be. Now, maybe that'll change over time. I don't see it changing much in the near future, but people rely almost, in my opinion, too much on electronic devices, our mobile devices that we have today, where we tweet, we post, we do all the things that we do. That's okay. We can use those to support our relationships and relationship development in general, but we get too comfortable sometimes sitting behind the laptop or texting and tweeting, and everybody likes to do that, but I think it's best in the long run to be able to look at somebody and have a conversation and just see their facial expression and know that you're resonating with somebody, or to have them know that you're intently listening to what it is that they have to say. And I tell people all the time, they'll say to me, I have 3,100 friends on Facebook, or I'm a lion on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn open networker, LION. Okay, that's great. But then I come back and I ask people, how many of those people on Facebook do you think you can call at 11:45 in the middle of the night and say, I need your help? Most people will stumble and stammer and say, well, I'm sure there's some people I could call. Well, quantify it. Give me a number. How many people? Most of the time, it's less than 1%, almost always less than 1%, which, in my opinion, makes great sense. I think it's probably a handful, literally 5 fingers. Those are the people you can probably call, and some of those people are probably family members. But 11:45 at night, you have an emergency with your family and you need to call somebody. You're not going to go to the Facebook page and just pull up anybody randomly. You're going to think of who are those people I need to call. So I think we have to be careful that just because we have a friend or we have a connection, that those people necessarily are going to want to work with us to create a win-win situation or a relationship. In fact, the vast majority of those people on Facebook and LinkedIn are probably going to say at 11:45 at night, who is this again?
Right.
And how do we know each other? I just think that's the way it happens. And again, not to knock the technology. It's a great tool to have, but it's not the end all when it comes to building relationships.
Right. It could be a door to building a real
absolutely.
relationship, but it's not a real relationship.
That's right.
Quite yet.
Yes.
It could be develop into something.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about for the guy who's not really good at developing relationships? I mean, let's say that, he's a little backwards. I mean, I've got some things I might recommend for him, but what would you recommend for the guy who's not, just doesn't feel comfortable dealing with people? How is he going to get, I mean, I think this is a must-have skill for anyone. I mean, I for sure. Mm-hmm. Being able to be interested in people and talk to people and ask them questions. And, do you have any suggested tools or books that you might recommend to somebody who's just not there yet?
Well, I like to read a lot of books. I like to learn a lot. In addition to reading, I listen to a lot of books on tape, only because I think that it's critically important to put quality information into your head and to be able to really understand what that information is all about. And I'm a huge proponent of what comes out is equal to what goes in. And I think that's one thing that you can consider doing. But from a relationship development standpoint and making yourself become more comfortable in building relationships, I think it really starts with just going out and giving yourself the opportunity to meet more people and not put too much pressure on yourself, but to go out and to regularly meet with people. And that can come in the form of a number of different things. I tell people all the time, buddy up, partner up with somebody when you're going to a networking event or you're going to a luncheon or whatever it might be. And there's almost always comfort in having somebody else there with you. And lots of times when my wife and I go out, we know that many times you're going to run into people that you've met before or that you've known for a long time. And we all have those instances where you can't remember somebody's name. So she and I have this plan where we go out and we meet people regularly, maybe even at a wedding reception personally. And I'll make it a point, if you come up to me and I don't remember your name, I'll shake your hand right away and say, I'm Robert Vogel. And almost always say, sure, I remember who you are. And then I'll say, and this is Barbara, my wife. And then Barbara says, and what is your name? She knows to say that right away, because if I didn't lead with, hey, Barry, meet Barbara, my wife, then that usually means I'm not sure if I know exactly this person's name or not. So, that's one of the techniques that you can use.
So you and your wife are drilled as a tag team.
Sometimes, yeah.
Tag team networking party.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you'll notice I said Barbara, my wife, not my wife, Barbara. She was Barbara long before she became my wife. So out of respect, I try to introduce people that way regularly.
That makes
whether
sense.
It be Dennis, my boss, or Tom, my friend, that just makes sense. They're who they are first and foremost before they ever engaged me. But
that's pretty polite. That's nice.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing I'll tell people is you just have to practice. I mean, think about people who are professional ball players, professional athletes, regardless of what the sport might be. How did they become as good as they are? They went out and practice and practice and practice. So how do I become better at relationship development? How do I become better at connecting and networking? Go out and network. Go out and connect. Build relationships. Ask questions. Ask them different ways. Find out what questions are easiest for you to ask. How do you approach somebody in different ways that might make them put their guard down more quickly so that you can build that relationship? You just don't read a textbook and go out and decide I'm going to try this or I'm going to try that. You got to go out and experiment. That's how people become better at whatever it is they want to do.
That's great. I actually did. The practice thing resonates with me because I actually was taking a class on communication once, and it had you do a drill where you had to go out on the street and talk to somebody and get where they were a bit more real to you and you liked them a bit more, right? And so you were supposed to do this with a few people. And the practice thing really resonates with me because I wasn't satisfied with doing it with a few people. I actually spent days doing it as part of this class. I went out in the evening and we did it, and I just did it again and again and again until I had a change personally regarding my comfort level with meeting strangers. I actually just I changed.
That's good.
Because I just did it enough to where it just changed.
Yeah, that's good. I try to do something almost every day that allows me to interact with somebody that I don't know. For instance, this morning at a coffee shop, I saw a guy with a shirt on that was a shade of blue that I just absolutely like. So while he was getting his coffee and I'm getting my coffee, he's getting his, I just said, hey, I really love that shirt that you got. Oh, well, thanks. I got it from my wife. No, I think maybe my kids gave it to me. And, we started talking, and then I had this logo put on it later. So, all of a sudden he starts opening up and telling me more things about himself. And by the time the day was over, when I left the coffee shop, I knew him, he knew me. We traded names. We talked about what we do for a living. So lots of times it's just, reaching out and doing something as simple as giving somebody a compliment. And you have to be sincere about it, and it has to be appropriate, obviously. But those are some of the simple things that you can do. And, I'll tell you one of the other things that I've done with my family. When we go to a ball game or we go out to any kind of a social event and I have my kids with me, I always make it a point to introduce my kids and say, okay, guys, I want you to shake hands with Barry and shake hands, good handshake like we've talked about, and my kids know to say, how are you and what are you doing? And I'm building them to understand the importance of socialization. I'm trying to help them understand that, and they enjoy that, and they're becoming more and more comfortable with making eye contact with people and talking with people and understanding that there's going to be a conversation here. Well, how old are you and what grade are you in, and those kinds of things. I think that's one of the greatest things that we can pass on to our kids and to the next generation is the socialization aspect of it, because again, it's so easy for kids today to get on our mobile devices or our iPads or our phones and sit at a table together and everybody's working on something, but they're not looking at each other having a conversation. That's an issue for me. So that's something that we do with our kids on a regular basis. And we went to the ballpark last weekend, and we happened to have nosebleed seats, but we rode the elevator up because we were already running late for the game. And the young lady sitting there running the elevator down at Busch Stadium, her name badge said Charlotte. So, hey guys, everybody say hi to Miss Charlotte. And everybody said, hi, Miss Charlotte. And she said, what are your names? So everybody got a chance to say their name. So, those things I think are learning opportunities, educational opportunities, not just for others, but for ourselves, because we came away and I just told you that her name was Charlotte. I remember her name was Charlotte. She remembered us. She might not remember my name the next time that she sees me, but when I see her and I'll say, hi, Charlotte, and she'll say, oh, how are you doing today? I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, how do you know this person? How do you know that person? And I'll say, well, I really don't know that person. Well, they were talking to you. Well, they were talking to me because I talked to them. If not now, I talked to them once before. That's just the way it works.
Yep. Well, that is the way it works. It's I tell you, I think people can take away this if they operate with this one thing to start with. People are interesting. Mm-hmm. That's why I think of when you're talking to me. People are interesting, yeah. And if you get interested in people, wow, your life could change. Your business can change.
Yeah, I agree.
If you were going to recommend a tool or a book, or a class or anything to somebody to get to help them to develop the skill, is there a particular book that you might recommend that we can put in the show notes?
Well, there are a couple of different books. One in particular that's pretty popular these days called The Go-Giver. I think a lot of people know that book. It's by a great book. Bob Burg, I think.
Mm-hmm, it is. And, Bob Burg and another gentleman. It's a fable-based story.
It is, yeah. It's a terrific book all about the whole concept of giving. and looking to give without expecting something in return. And inevitably, things will come back to you, whether it be from the person to whom you've given something, or another person that person might knows, or somebody from out of nowhere for whatever reason. We may never know what that reason is, but it's the whole concept of looking to give without expecting something in return. Another book is called 7L, The 7 Levels of Communication.
I've heard of that book.
It's by Michael Maher, Maher, and it's a phenomenal book. Again, it's fable-based, and it's all about communicating with people on a regular basis and trying to find ways that you can connect effectively with people. And it's a business book, but it's written in such a way that you don't feel like you're reading out of a textbook for school or something. There's another book I would recommend called Charge, and it's by Brendan Bouchard, and it's all about waking up charged every day and thinking about those things that you need to do
Energized.
on a daily basis.
Charged
Being
as in
energized,
energy.
yeah. Nobody really energizes us. We energize ourselves, and we get ourselves charged up. And I have told family members in the past about positive mental attitude, and I have people say to me all the time, "You're always so upbeat, and you're always, interested in talking to people about this topic or that topic, and I don't know how you do it. I can't force myself to do it." Well, it all starts with the most important conversation of the day, and that's the conversation you have with yourself in the mirror every morning. You decide what kind of day you're going to have. And I think if you have a curveball thrown at you, have a beanball thrown at you, you have to accept that and say, okay, how do I handle this curveball today? What can I learn from this? What good can I make out of whatever it is that just happened? It might be Pollyanna to many people, but I think that's the only way to approach things. Otherwise, you find yourself struggling day to day, and you waste precious hours in a day. You might waste precious days in a week or weeks in a month. So it's all about your attitude, in my opinion.
That's great. All right, fantastic. Yeah, attitude, being interested in people.
Yes.
That's good stuff. Great books. Those will all be in the show notes for people. I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And if you could leave our listeners with any particular word of wisdom, anything you want to leave our listeners with on what they could, that might take them forward.
Well, I guess two things. One, I would refer back to what I mentioned earlier, the RCV decree. Relationships create value, and you do that by connecting, cultivating, and collaborating. And then the last thing, a couple of months ago, we lost Maya Angelou, and she had a quote that she said several times in many different ways, but essentially it's, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I think that's critical to what we want to do day in and day out. It's all about fit and feel. How do you fit into certain communities, whether it be your business community, your personal life, or anything else? And how does it feel to work with me? How does it feel to be my friend? That's the way you want to approach it. And people tell you all the time, well, we want to treat people as we would want to be treated. That's what it comes down to.
Fantastic. All right, Robert Vogel, thank you, from the Good Faith Business Network. Thank you for joining us today. You look for Robert's contact information, by the way, if you'd like to reach him, in the show notes. And you can also take advantage of his services. There'll be a link to his website, and you'll be able to reach him through those notes as well. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Is your website working for you? Is your website getting you results? Do you get daily or weekly leads? You should be. If you're not getting the leads that you need, it's time to reevaluate your website. Get our professional website evaluation. Go to reallivemarketing.com and sign up for our professional website evaluation. Let's get this done today and bring your website up to where it needs to be. Great. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed that episode of Real Live Marketing with Robert there on relationship building as a marketing tool. So here's the tool I wanted to give you. This is one tip, and I'm going to give you 10 ways to apply it. All right, so the tip is ask questions. When you meet people and you're out doing networking, ask questions. It's really important. You'll gain a pretty deep reality on the person that you're talking to. Your liking for them will come up. They will enjoy being listened to. All these things occur if you just ask questions. So when you're out there marketing, here's some questions that you can ask. How did you get started in this business that you're in? This would be one question that you could very easily ask, let them share their story, etc. Another question would be, what do you see changing, or how do you see your business changing over the next few years? It's a great question. It'll actually get them thinking about their business and allow them to share some of their insights and allow you to learn something as well. You might ask, like in my case, because I'm in marketing, I would ask something related to my profession. What are some of the best ways that you receive new clients? How do you get new business? That would be something I would be interested in. They could tell me about, and I could ask about their process regarding getting new clients. Another question is, what makes you different from other businesses of your type? I'm always curious what individuals have as their special trait. Like in my business, one of our traits that I would consider special is the fact that we train our staff endlessly. We train our staff endlessly. We ask them to read, we ask them to study, we encourage them listening to podcasts and such. So, real important. Another good question would be, what's the strangest or funniest thing that you've ever seen happen in your business? So they could tell you a funny or interesting story. That would be great. Another great question would be, who are your heroes in your industry? They give you a chance to tell you some interesting stories about people in their industry that they've seen do great things. Another question, what are your favorite books in your industry? What are your favorite books related to your industry? Or you could ask them if they seem to be knowledgeable in one aspect of their business. Let's say they own a contracting company, but they seem to really understand stuff about sales. You could ask them, what's your favorite book on selling? Here's a great question as well. If you could describe your business in 2 or 3 sentences, how would you describe it? This gets you their elevator statement. Another question is, how big would you grow your business if the sky was the limit? Not only is this a good question and a possible great conversation starter, but you're actually doing them a favor, getting them to think big. This question is extremely important. Hopefully they've thought of it, and it would be a good one for them to ask their employees. What product or service do you feel like you actually deliver to people? How do you help them to improve their lives? This gets them to the final result of what they accomplish. So they may realize they're not in the, in some cases, they may realize, you know what? I don't make money. That's not what I make. I actually make a product that I give to people. And it's a much better viewpoint. You could also ask them, what advice would you give someone just starting in your industry? And lastly, although this is a common one, how did you get started in your business? It's funny, I found out the other day a gentleman who owns a direct mail company here in St. Louis actually started as one of the people out on the assembly line and moved his way up through the ranks and eventually purchased the business from the previous owners. Now, I don't run into that story every day, but it's definitely one worth hearing. But the only way you'll ever find out is by asking questions. There are many other questions you can ask, like, what business advice do you think most people need these days? What do you feel is the thing that is holding back most business people today? You really can get a feel for somebody's philosophy. And I think I've given you more than 10 at this point of questions. The idea is, the big tip, right, is not so much what the questions are, but to ask them and be genuinely interested and find out what's going on with people. You'll gain a deeper reality on the people that you're talking to. You'll develop a relationship. You'll actually like these people for real, because by understanding them, by gaining that reality, that's how we develop our bonds of liking and love that carry us through and become real relationships. And honestly, that's what business is all about these days. It's about actually developing relationships and getting people to, and you've heard it before, know, like, and trust you. So thanks again for joining us with Real Live Marketing. We'll see you next week.